Today's guest is a retail guy. He worked for Macy's, ran stores for Gap, worked in financial services, and right now he's the CEO of a real estate company in Newark, New Jersey. So why should you, a construction company owner, care what he has to say? Because the problems you face are the problems that he's addressed in retail. Your people don't know what winning looks like. They're making decisions based on their own priorities instead of yours. And you're not following up enough to fix those problems and those misplaced priorities. Jon Dario figured this out standing in a Gap outlet store, watching customers drop their merchandise on the floor and walk out. The managers were focused on folding clothes. The customers just wanted to pay and leave. Nobody had defined what actually mattered. So Jon built something he calls the Pyramid of Standards. It's a framework for getting clear on what's most important in your business and making sure your team executes on it every single day. You're going to hear how to build that pyramid for your company, how to follow up so your standards actually stick, and why the smartest leaders stop pretending they have all the answers. So, what can you learn from a retail guy? You can learn a lot. Let's dive in and learn more. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Jon, welcome to Construction Genius.
Thank you very much, Eric. Glad to be here.
Please give us a little bit about your background.
Sure. My background is mostly in retail management. I started with Macy's out of college. Spent a few years with them. I spent about 10 years with Gap Inc., traveling around the country and doing a number of different jobs for them. I went into financial services retail with Bank of America and a foreign currency company. And my current day job is as a CEO of a real estate company based in Newark, New Jersey. And we have properties throughout New York and New Jersey.
In all that experience that you have, I'd like you to give us your opinion of human nature and what makes people tick.
That's a great question. The thing that I think really ties people together in whatever industry and whatever environment, people want to be successful. They don't always know exactly what it takes to be successful, and they don't always have exactly the same motivations. But I don't think that people get up in the morning and decide that they're going to sabotage the work of the company that they're employed by. Managers and leaders are responsible for helping them achieve their goals.
When you say people want to be successful, the first thing that pops into my mind is some people just want a paycheck, and they define success as being able to consistently get a paycheck. And so they're motivated by doing whatever's necessary to get that paycheck, but not necessarily what's beyond getting that paycheck. How does someone who is building a company that has a motivation beyond the paycheck work with folks who may be motivated and define success in ways different than they do?
I think that people generally like to be part of a winning team. Mm-hmm. And if a leader can define what winning looks like and can communicate in a way that builds on people's desire to be part of that winning environment, there's a formula that works. Ultimately, I think managers and leaders need to understand what makes each individual person tick and needs to be able to push the right buttons on them. But if we can communicate well enough to get people on board with a consistent idea of what winning looks like, then I think most people rise to that occasion. I have a concept that I call the Pyramid of Standards. The Pyramid of Standards is a way to kind of take the idea of defining what's important and making it clear to everybody. I mean, I'll take the example of my company right now. We have our kind of mission is to do right. And, that sounds very noble, but the do right really in our organization has three different branches to it. It's do right for the company, do right for the team, and do right for the community. And those three things absolutely are in conflict with each other in some situation. It's not always best for the employee to do the right thing for the company. And so I don't know that it's easy to set a definition, but if you get everybody on board with the idea that all three of those things are important, and sometimes one is going to take precedence over another, then at least everybody knows what the rules of the game are.
Okay, so let's talk about that pyramid of standards a little bit. Why do you use the analogy or the picture of a pyramid?
Yeah, I love the analogy of a pyramid because a pyramid has a very wide base that supports the whole structure. And I like to think that the standards that sit at the base of an organization's pyramid are the things that are absolutely fundamental and foundational to organizational success. That the company can't continue if the base of the pyramid is weak. The things in the middle of the pyramid are also important, but they're the things that the team should focus on only after the base of the pyramid is solid and reliable. And then the stuff at the top of the pyramid is the great stuff that's supplemental to organization success. It's when the team is chugging along and all the other basic stuff is being handled well, then you can move on to the top of the pyramid. And it just creates this hierarchy of that in my mind sends the visual message that you need that stable base before you can move to the supplemental stuff.
So the stable base, how would you describe that stable base specifically?
Yeah, so I'll describe it because I'm a retailer. It's easiest for me to describe in retail terms. Sure. We could translate it to the construction world.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
The idea in retail is that the most important thing for the company is that the money the customers give you when they buy your products or services gets to the bank. And you have to start with when customers decide that they want to purchase your product, then you have to make it easy for them to pay. And you have to make sure that your operational standards are strong enough that the money's actually getting where it's supposed to get.
That seems obvious what you're saying in a certain way. And so when you define it as make it easy for them to pay, why is that? You use that phrase, money gets to the bank. Why is it making it easy for them to pay? Why is that so important?
So I'll give you a really visual example. A busy store on, Saturday before Christmas, for instance, lots of people are out there wanting to buy products.
Yes.
And you can, as a retailer, do a great job of advertising product and displaying product and everything else. But if the cash register lines are too long and it's going to take the customer 30 minutes of standing in line to make their purchase, they're likely to just drop the merchandise on the floor and walk out to the next store where it would be easier. So that's where the pyramid comes into play. It's, a retailer that focuses so much on merchandising and that they neglect the foundation of the pyramid, which is really making it easy for the customer to complete the purchase. All the time that they put into merchandising is wasted because the money didn't get to the bank anyway.
Across the spectrum of Macy's and Gap, and I'm not sure about maybe B of A as well, but was that a consistent theme that you saw, or did that vary from company to company?
It varies from company to company. It varies actually within companies. I created the pyramid of standards when I started with Gap in the Gap brand division. I ran the flagship store in downtown Manhattan. And in that store the priorities were about visual representation and personal selling and so on. I ended up moving from the Gap brand into the outlet division, the factory outlet division. And that business, even though it still had the Gap label on it, was a much different business because the consumers were shopping in a much different way, in a different way. They were looking for bargains. There was much heavier foot traffic in the stores and lower cost base. And so there was less staff to help. And that was where it really occurred to me that the priorities of the business, that the pyramid was different even between the Gap brand and the Gap factory.
It sounds like the foundation of the pyramid of standards is operational in nature, not necessarily philosophical. Is that right?
I think the goal of the pyramid is to facilitate operations. But if I translate it to the construction world, for instance, there are some simple, just in a really simple way.
Please.
Construction project or a construction company could be focused on making profit, could be their number one motivation. Time and budget could be a primary motivation. The quality of the work could be a primary motivation. And again, those things they don't necessarily all line up. Quality of work can be in conflict with time and budget.
Yes.
And it is the owner's job to figure out what's more important for them and whether that applies to the customer base that they're looking to attract.
Yeah. So, you nailed it there, right? We've got quality of work, we've got schedule or time, and then you've got the money part, the budget, right?
Sure.
And there's an old saying, right? There's quality, there's speed, and there's cost. Pick two of the three.
Right. Yes.
And it seems to me what happens in a lot of companies is, so let's say someone starts a construction company and they most likely, if it's a commercial construction company, have prior experience and therefore technical ability to execute a particular type of project. They go after that type of project, and that then begins to shape the company. And as they go through various iterations of the business, they slowly begin to develop right client, right job, right location.
Makes sense? Yes.
Because when we think about like the idea of a pyramid of standards, we think about something that's sort of set in stone, right? But it sounds like it's something that's also very dynamic as well. Am I hearing that right?
Without a doubt. I mean, I think and I'll take it one step further within the pyramid of standards. What I teach is a kind of a next step. After you define what your pyramid of standards is, you establish routines and you establish more specific measurements that go along with those standards. And those things absolutely evolve over time. And I think it's also important that a company or a manager uses the pyramid of standards to develop habits. The more you can establish routines and habits with the team, then the more you can move on to new routines and habits. And that's how you continue to grow and continue to make the team better and better.
Back to the example that you gave, moving from the Manhattan Gap to the outlets, that's where you came up with that idea of get the money to the bank or make it easy for the customer to pay.
Yes.
Now, what's interesting about that, right, is that that's a very direct insight. And when you paint the picture of it, visually it works, right? If I have a long line and I've got another outlet next door, I can just drop my stuff and go to the outlet next door, and you know what I mean?
Yes.
Typically, when you get to that level of clarity, it takes a lot of thought. So I know nothing about retail, and yet you described it, and in 30 seconds, I understood it. What can someone in your position, a CEO of a company or someone in responsibility, what questions do they need to ask in order to develop their own pyramid of standards and get that clarity?
Love that question. And a lot of times it starts with observation, right? I mean, that exact situation that we talked about and that you summarized so well happened because when I moved into the leadership position in the outlet division, one of the early things I did, I traveled all around the country and did unannounced visits at outlet locations. And I just watched. I watched what customers were doing. I watched what was happening with the business. And I started to see things like long cash register lines and customers dropping merchandise and walking out of the store. And that led me to ask the question. That led me to ask the managers, why did they not have enough cash registers open? What were the challenges that they were experiencing? What did they think was most important? What were they spending their time on that prevented them from having enough cash registers open? And when I got the answers to those questions, it helped me realize that they were all in situations where they had to make choices. And they were making choices based on their own beliefs or their own backgrounds, not based on some central idea of what was necessary for success in the outlet business.
Okay, so that's really interesting. All right, quick break to talk about my book, Construction Genius. This is what I want you to do. Go to Amazon, search for the book, read all of the 5-star reviews, because there's a ton of them. Over 50 to be precise. And the reason I want you to read them is because real people wrote those reviews who've actually read the book. And it'll give you an idea of why you should go and buy a copy right now on Amazon. And here's the deal. If you purchase 10 or more copies for your company, and then send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, I'll come in via Zoom and do a 1-hour Q&A and a bonus training session with your team at no charge. I normally charge $4,500 for an hour of my time. And again, for you, I'll do it at no charge if you buy 10 or more copies of my book. And the reason you should buy it is all in the title. It's effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS, leadership, strategy, sales, and marketing advice for construction companies. So if you're in the construction industry, this book is for you. So you can get it on Amazon. You can also get it on Audible in the audio version as well, narrated by yours truly. And I know you'll really enjoy it. So go out and get the book. And now back to the interview. So the analogy in construction obviously would be someone takes over the division of a construction company or moves into the CEO role, and they go out to job sites and they observe how jobs are being built. And you could even go into project management meetings and observe how project managers are running their meetings or estimators and things like that. My question, what popped into my head is like, if I'm in the Manhattan store of Gap, I'm assuming that on a surface level, that's a relatively prestigious place to be working in the Gap ecosystem. Is that right?
Very correct, yes.
Okay. So then you move into the outlets and you have a certain worldview when it comes to Gap. And so you go on these store visits, right? And I don't know about you, but I know my temptation would be, when I think of outlet stores, I think of piles of clothes that are unfolded, which would be completely unacceptable in Manhattan. Is that right?
Right. Yes,
Right.
true.
How did you set aside your preconceived notions of how things should be so that you could actually observe and take in the information in a way that was useful?
You hit the nail on the head with exactly the problem that I experienced and all the managers in the business were experiencing. All of the managers throughout the outlet division had been Gap brand managers in high profile stores. And they all carried with them that idea that clothing had to be folded pristinely and so on. And I guess I just was in the unique position of being able to observe from the standpoint of the ultimate goal of the company. I didn't own a store at the time. I had run outlet stores, but at that point I was in a more detached role where I could step back and look at it through the eyes of the customer. And when I was able to see things through the eyes of the customer, I realized what was frustrating customers. And as I spoke to customers, I began to understand that they wanted to get in and get out. They wanted to be able to find their size quickly. They wanted to be able to know what the price was, what the value was that they were paying. And it quickly became clear that those three things rose to the the top of the list, but the bottom of the pyramid. All right. As I described it, it's give me my merchandise in the right size. Let me know what price it is and make it easy for me to pay.
Okay. Yeah, they really don't care if it's folded or not because they're not coming in for the retail experience. They're coming in to get a deal.
Exactly.
Okay, so then as I'm building this pyramid of standards and I'm translating it into my company, when you were speaking there about the customer experience, I had this sort of like a meter, right? Going towards the customer and then going towards the business. Which comes first, the customer or the business?
The customer is the business, I think. Without the customer, there is no business.
There you
So
go.
I think maybe you have to figure out which is the right customer. I mean, there's the customers out there,
Right.
but once you have a view of who your right customer is, then you really have to do everything you can to make that.
So let's just, again, think about it in this way is if I have a certain mindset, such as I get the creeps if I walk into a store and things aren't folded, therefore, in my stores, things will always be folded. If that's the case, then really I can't go into the outlet business and expect to be successful because the economics wouldn't work.
For sure. You're familiar with the Old Navy brand?
Yes.
That's part of Gap?
Right, that's part of Gap, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So when the Old Navy brand started, again, they took a lot of managers from Gap. And so Gap brand managers were in that Old Navy environment, which was similar to the outlet environment, actually.
Yeah.
The head of stores for Old Navy had, when he visited locations around the country, he would walk into the store. The first thing he would do is go to the key item tables, and he would look at every stack of clothes on the table and make sure that every size was there. If there was a size missing from a particular color of a key item, he would go to the stock area and he would see if it was in the stock room somewhere. And if the item was in the stock room but not represented on a table, the visit or the inspection was immediately a bad inspection. It was not a good result for that manager.
Yes.
And the head of stores was so relentless and so consistent with that process that he reinforced the message over and over and over again to the point where he was incredibly predictable. And most managers were able to adapt to that new mentality and were able to kind of change their minds because they knew what standards were. And some didn't, and they just didn't make it. They weren't right for that business.
Yeah. Okay. So great words there. Relentless, consistent, reinforcing the message. So clarity is important, but once clarity has been achieved, consistency is essential.
For sure. Habits, consistency. I'm a big believer in, whether it's in the retail world or in the construction world or virtually any other world, you can't live or die by the home run in the bottom of the ninth inning. You live or die by playing consistent baseball every inning during the game. In business, it is about doing the right things right over and over and over again, even if it's boring. And that boring stuff is what makes the difference. And I think it's equally applicable in the construction world. If you're building houses, you want to do things the right way over and over and over again. When I say the right way, I guess it depends on what the builder's what the builder's pyramid looks like.
Yep.
Because some obviously favor different priorities, but in any event, it's got to be, everybody's got to get the message that we're going to do it over and over and over again.
I want to come back to this idea of consistency. And I think packed into that idea of consistency is the thought of follow-up. As a manager, as a leader, one perhaps delegates a task, and then that relentless follow-up doesn't happen. Why are good follow-up skills so critical for someone in leadership?
A few reasons. First of all, I think follow-up has to be frequent. It has to be predictable. It has to result in good feedback. And the frequency piece of this means that if you're not following up early enough to catch a mistake or to catch something that's off track soon enough, then the problem can get too far down the road that it becomes hard to fix, or it becomes costly to fix.
Yes.
So you want to get it early so that you can fix it before it's super problematic. That's number one.
Yep.
Number two, the more consistent and relentless you are with your follow-up, the more you set the expectation in people that you will be following up. I have a little story on this that goes back to my retail days. I was running a small regional sporting goods store, and I had 6 department supervisors, and we had every Monday morning, we got the list of stuff that was going to go on sale the following weekend. And I would walk each of the 6 departments with the supervisor on Monday morning, and we'd make a list of all the things that had to be moved in the department to get ready for the weekend sale. And then I'd walk every Friday afternoon and make sure that they were all, everything was moved. Yep. And I, over and over again, I was finding that none of the department supervisors were getting their lists done by Friday afternoon. And I was starting to get mad. And so I decided one Monday at 2:00 in the afternoon, I would walk around and check their progress. And they all looked at me like I had 3 heads, because I didn't normally check until Friday. And nobody had anything done. I was mad. I went home mad. They were mad at me. Tuesday, 2:00 in the afternoon, I do the same thing. Nobody has anything done. I'm even more mad, and they're even more mad at me. And I go home and not a happy Tuesday night. Wednesday, 2:00, I walk the first couple of departments. Supervisors have nothing done. But then I see one of my department supervisors, Regina. She's got a big smile on her face. And guess what? She had every single thing on her list done. And I asked her how she got it done, why she got it done. And her answer is the best lesson I ever had in management. She said, "You came out 2:00 on Monday. I didn't have anything done. You came out 2:00 on Tuesday. I didn't have anything done. I figure you're probably going to come out 2:00 on Wednesday, and I didn't want to disappoint you." And I've got tears in my eyes, at the time, thinking about Regina and how she wanted to be successful. And of course, the others caught on, but it kind of flipped my thinking. I didn't have a problem with the supervisors. They weren't the problem. The problem was I wasn't following up enough to make it important. And when I started following up, then they got their stuff done. And it was that simple. So you set the expectation, people are going to rise to that challenge. And then finally, I said that it's got to result in feedback. Follow-up is critical. If you don't follow up, you don't get the opportunity to provide feedback in the form of positive reinforcement, which really motivates people to continue to perform in the same way. And it doesn't give you the opportunity to redirect if redirection is necessary, and you continue to stray from the objective.
As you reflect back on your career and you're now in a CEO role, what are 2 or 3 of the lessons that you've brought into the CEO role that if you hadn't gone through your career in the way that you have, you wouldn't really have those as key sort of driving points for yourself?
Yeah, the biggest one I'd say is that I just don't have all the answers. I have to be willing to listen well and to be open-minded to collaborate with people. There's no chance that I'm going to be able to control everything that happens in the organization as CEO, or even when I was, earlier in my career, when I was a manager running one store, I couldn't control everything that was happening. And so it was really important for me to make sure that I was keeping my ears open. And I'd say the second thing is kind of along the same lines, but it's got some nuance to it. It's something I call white belt mentality. For people who are familiar with martial arts. Sure. White belt is the belt of a learner, and black belt is the belt of an expert.
Yes.
And no matter how many years you spend doing in a particular industry, if you think that you're not able to learn something new today and tomorrow and every day after that, you're putting yourself into a position where number one, you're not going to have the respect of your team. And number two, you're going to miss a lot of opportunities to get better and to help your team get better. So I've really tried to adopt that white belt mentality as well.
How has that helped you to enhance your leadership authority? Because many times leaders they feel, and perhaps others even perceive, that the leader needs to have all the answers.
Yeah. I once attended a seminar with an author who gave the quote, "The best leaders aren't the ones who have all the answers. They're the ones who can unlock the answers in other people's heads." And I don't think you can maintain leadership credibility by asking questions and not giving answers. If you ask questions and let people figure it out, particularly if you don't even know the answer. I'm not a big fan of being disingenuous.
Yeah.
If you have the answer, don't pretend that you don't, but because people see through that pretty quickly, I think. But it doesn't mean you have to have all the answers, and that's okay. I think people who are humble enough to say, look, I don't know exactly what the right answer is, but let's work together to try and figure it out. That's what I'm good at. I'm me as a leader, and I'm using that not me personally, but just in general, if a leader says, my role is to help you figure your course out, then let's do it together.
Is that a perspective you've always held, or is that something that was developed over time? Because sometimes, when you're younger, I mean, even when you're older, one's ego can get in the way. How did that work for you?
It was a turning point in my career. When I started, I was talking earlier about moving from Gap brand to the Gap outlet division. I managed a district in the Southeast for the outlet division, and I was very good at it. I had a lot of success. Then I got promoted to a director of operations role, and I had regional managers throughout the country who I didn't have formal authority over, but I had kind of responsibility for indirectly helping them with their jobs. And I thought I had all the answers. I thought I had done a great job with my little world in the Southeast, and I was a bit arrogant about it and kept running into brick walls. And I had a boss who said to me, look, don't tell everybody what to do. You may be right. I don't know if you're right. You may be wrong, but even if you're right, they're not going to listen to you. You got to figure out a way to work with them. And when I started to be more collaborative and to have two-way dialogue with people, lo and behold, I realized, number one, I didn't actually know everything. And there was other perspective that was valuable for me. And more importantly, I realized that people liked me better and respected me more because I was engaging in real dialogue. And we together got much better results.
That's excellent. Excellent. So tell us a little bit more about you in terms of how people can get in contact with you. And I know you're the CEO of Edison Properties, but you also do some work in addition to that with companies.
Yeah, exactly. My consulting business, I have a website, jondario.com, jondario.com. And if anybody sees anything they like there's a little button you can click to reach out.
Excellent. Yeah. So we'll have that in the show notes, jondario.com. Jon, one last question. In all of your travels all over the country, what's the best restaurant you've ever been to?
Oh, my goodness. Let's see. That's a tough one. There's a little steakhouse, Indianapolis, called, what the heck is the name of that place? They have shrimp cocktail with the hottest shrimp cocktail sauce. Oh, my goodness. I can't remember the name of this place. I'm going to Google it because you've got me curious now. I'm going to Google this.
Okay. Could it be, let's see here, St. Elmo Steakhouse?
That's it, St. Elmo. St. Elmo's is it. Yep, that's exactly it.
The power of the internet. St. Elmo Steakhouse. Yes. Okay, so we're going to put a link in the show notes if you're ever in Indianapolis for whatever reason.
Yes.
St. Elmo Steakhouse is the place to go, and we will have a link in the show notes to that.
Perfect.
Awesome. Jon, thank you for joining us today on Construction Genius.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found my conversation with Jon useful. Feel free to connect with him. Check out the links in the show notes. And as always, please give Construction Genius a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts. The more ratings and reviews we get, the more the podcast will be seen across the wonderful internet. And I'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity, and to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.